20 years, both offshore and onshore, Kirstie. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
How did you get into this?
How did I get into the energy sector? Well, that was a really long time ago. And thanks. I'm always grateful for those reminders that I've been doing this for several decades now. But I
Shouldn't
was,
have told me.
oh no, I was actually 15 and I'm 42 now. So I'll let you do the maths. But I was 15 when I was offered a work experience week from school. And I went to Tariff Academy and I was given the opportunity to work at BP for a week in the environmental department. And that week for me was the most exciting week I could remember having. I felt like I was this grown-up executive, and that I thought everybody would imagine I properly worked there. You know, I thought I looked like a grown-up and everything, but I was completely fascinated and inspired by the environment, the people, the projects. I just thought this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and that feeling's never left me, to be honest.
When did you start offshore then when you actually went into it professionally?
So I did my work experience, finished school, of course. I actually went off backpacking around the world when I was 18, for a year, did all that kind of stuff. And then I ultimately I knew I wanted to work in the energy sector. But as sometimes happens when you're 19 and you're not quite sure what to do next, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to study discipline wise. And I realized that I was going to struggle in terms of my career path until I knew what I wanted to do discipline wise. So this seems like a bit of a random segue, but I actually went and worked in the health and fitness industry for a couple of years. So I worked as a personal trainer and sports therapist for a couple of years. And it was really interesting. Loved it. But ultimately I still wanted to work in energy, but I hadn't quite figured out exactly what I wanted to do in the sector. So somewhat on a whim, I decided to go through my survival, and I decided to get my offshore survival training and then find a way to get offshore and then figure it out from there. So I thought once I'm out and offshore, I'll figure out what I ultimately want to do. So it was quite an unusual path for me. I spoke to everybody I'd ever met to try and get an opportunity to work offshore. And I actually worked as a stewardess initially. So my very first trip offshore was on the Uski Gorm, which was a very aged FPSO at the time. And I went to work on night shifts doing dishes because the dishwasher had broken down on the Uski Gorm. So flew out, stopped on the Triton to refuel. So my first step on a North Sea asset was on the Triton. And I just thought, this is so cool. Walking through the process, I just thought, oh my gosh, this is everything I dreamt of. Got to the Uski Gorm, ready for my big networking opportunity. Because I thought, get out there and I can network. And then I was put on night shift doing dishes alone. And I thought,
And you saw no one.
this isn't quite what I imagined. But I thought, we won't worry. You know, I'll figure a way. And so I did a few trips. Luckily, I made it to day shift. And then a couple of trips later, I got promoted to be lead stewardess. So I ran the bond, which was very exciting. So I sold the cigarettes and the chocolate, which was a quite an influential position to be in. And very, very long story short, Joe, a wee while after that, I was offered a project administration role. And then I started studying production technology, doing my city and guilds, again, showing my age. And then I went into project coordination, predominantly on diving vessels. And I did that for 5 years.
How was that?
I loved it, you know. I always like being on fixed assets as well, but I have an absolute soft spot for DSV life. I loved diving operations and ROV operations, particularly remedial well intervention work. It was so exciting. It kind of felt like you were Ghostbusters, you know, if there was a trouble with a well. They knew who to call, you know, and off we'd go.
Yeah.
Off we'd go to save the day and get production back where it needed to be. So you never knew what job was necessarily coming next. It was interesting. It was a very kind of immersive world to work in. And as I was studying, I was learning so much and getting so much exposure to different technical problems. It's great. Loved it.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt this show, and I really hope you're enjoying it. One thing I'm going to ask you, if you're listening to it and you're not liking, following or subscribing to it, could I ask a massive favour that you do? It really helps the show, it helps me bring in more people, and it helps me get more stories out there, which in favour brings more stories back in. Let's get back to it. What were you studying? I take it obviously you were offshore at the time. What did you study?
It was production technology.
Oh yeah, you did say that earlier.
Yeah.
That's I was listening here. Sorry,
So
switched up a bit with the Ghostbusters bit.
That get your attention.
Yeah, it did a bit. When did you realise business development was for you?
So after my offshore years, I guess I took my next kind of slight segue, if you like. So I in my career, I can sort of see the clear points where I pivoted, and they've been meaningful pivots generally, and have all counted towards where I am now. I mean, the dishes on the Uski Gourmet, it's hard to see a direct line to where I am, but it did. It was part of the story, right? And it probably gave me a whole new insight to different areas of our support crew offshore as well. So anyway, when I came home from offshore, I decided I wanted to get into technical sales. And I had some opportunities to go into roles similar to my offshore role, but based onshore, and I didn't really want to do that. If I could have gone down the kind of ops and project coordination on role, project management onshore, and decided against that, wanted to get into technical sales. And my research told me that if you could be successful in technical recruitment, that can be quite a good road into kind of commercial management and technical sales, because recruitment's actually quite difficult. Selling humans are tricky business as a product. So I went and worked for Hays, who are the largest specialist recruitment company in the world, and ended up having a number of fast track promotions there, and ended up in a national kind of management role for them, for Hays Energy and Hays Oil and Gas in Scotland. And that was an excellent learning curve for me. And that was the first time I built a recruitment business. And I've gone on to build some other recruitment businesses throughout my career. So that was that. And then from there, I went into engineering consultancy, specifically in growing engineering businesses.
Decommissioning is one of the big things that you're speaking quite a lot of at the moment. I think you did something at SPE Europe as well, didn't you? Offshore Europe.
I hosted my own event during the Offshore Europe week. I didn't speak at the main conference this time. I did last time. But yeah, and the company I work for, PDI, we're very proud sponsors of at the Offshore Energy's UK decommissioning conference in St Andrews, which is coming up in November. But yeah, decommissioning is a wonderful part of the sector to work in. The majority of our business at the moment is in North Sea decommissioning. And it's a fascinating part of the sector to work in. I've been heavily involved for the last 3 years in decom, much more so than I ever have. It's technically really interesting and creative, and it's a great community as well, the decom community.
Why does it matter so much though?
Well, decom is, as an industry, the UK's decommissioning sector is best in the world at decom. And you often hear people talking about it, and you probably hear me boring on about it quite a lot, but I really mean it when I say it is and should be and must be, one of our great industrial export stories, our decommissioning industry. How we do decommissioning in the North Sea is so globally significant, and it's incredible. And the skills that have created this incredible sector that we have now power the decom part of the sector, and also decommissioning and the body of work that exists for the decommissioning supply chain is really important on a glide path to net zero as well. So as we're looking to transfer some of our skills over to different energy sources, I'm a big fan of energy addition rather than transition. We're not ready to transition anything just yet. We need to add more energy. No. We need to add, not stop anything. But as we're going through this period of change, decommissioning is the perfect body work to protect our supply chain. But we've just got to make sure we're executing more of it.
Is there a lot of opportunity in it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the body of work is incredible in the North Sea. Of course, there's a lot of work to do, decades of work to do, and I sincerely hope that um, we're going to be continuing to see a little bit more production in the North Sea, which will make the right hand side of decommissioning move out a bit further for some of the newer assets. But we've got to get moving with more decom for the older assets now, because the supply chain needs the work and the work needs done.
Yeah. How busy are you with decom? Is that kind of like, obviously you, as you said, you work for PDI. How busy are you? Is most of your work around that at the moment?
Yeah, so over half of our revenue at the moment is decommissioning. We specialize in subsea decommissioning, but we also have done more and more topsides decommissioning consultancy work the last few years. So, from an engineering and project management perspective, decommissioning is central to what we do.
One of the things that stuck with me since I first actually had a phone call with you, um, when we had a conversation for a wee while, was the mental health aspect. And one of the things I actually took on board was you actually said that people going offshore are institutionalized, and that's actually stuck with me because I've started looking at things a lot different. But one of the other things you said is that you started looking a bit into the mental health aspect of decommissioning. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. So, mental health in the energy sector is a subject that I am very committed to and passionate about. And then specifically in decom, there are additional mental health implications which are complex and important and need better attention. So, that you probably read a number of statistics, but offshore workers are 15 times more likely to die by suicide than their onshore counterparts. That is before decommissioning. That's just a statistic. That's a general statistic. So that's pretty scary. When I worked offshore, I lost my manager to suicide. And that stuck with me, of course, and has stayed with everybody who knew him. So I guess having that in the back of my mind for always, of course, has led me to this place of wanting to understand more and do more. And when we look at decom, so why is decom a particular mental health subject? Well, it's my belief that, and there are lots of research about is that our offshore personnel, many of them feel that their persona, their feeling of self-worth, their feeling of identity is really linked with their work going offshore. For a lot of people, being an offshore worker is a huge sense of pride and a huge part of what makes them them. And a big part of that for a lot of people is the asset they work on. So a lot of people work on the same asset for years, for decades. We have people that have worked on the same asset for 35 plus years in the North Sea. And so if you're going to take that away all of a sudden, you're taking away more than a job and a workplace. You're taking away like a whole system of support and identity and belonging. And it's incredibly important that we ensure that we offer the best possible support to people as they're facing these big life changes.
You've worked offshore, obviously, and so you've obviously experienced the kind of mental health side of things, from being away and whatnot. But how did it affect you in any way?
Yeah, and I did, and I would say it's a moment in time. 5 years, right, is nothing compared to a lot of our offshore personnel. But even for me, when I worked offshore for 5 years, and it was a long time ago, and I used to do some very long trips, and these days you don't have people routinely doing ridiculously long trips, which I think is probably quite a good idea. But at times I'd be offshore for 7 weeks and home briefly, and these were big trips. I used to find the transition quite challenging. When I was out there, and we spoke about institutionalization. When I was out there and doing in the swing of 12, 14 hours every day, 7 days a week, it kind of takes over. And you know how it is. The first week is always really slow, right? And then
Yeah.
And then once you're in it, I don't know how you find, can you get to week 6 or 7? And yeah, you're ready to go home, but equally, you do another 3 weeks. It's all kind of the same at that
Yeah.
point. And
Yeah.
for me, then when I landed home, it took me several days to decompress and kind of just find my old routine again. And I think that cycle, it changes you. I think I find it changed me as well.
No, I do agree, and I've had a couple of people on, and we've spoken mostly off air, but I found it this time, like the last 6 months, I've done quite a lot away. I was only back about 6 weeks in those 6 months, but yeah, I found it was when you come back, especially the missus, like who's in that same set routine. She's constantly, keeping 4 kids alive, which is obviously the main goal at the end of the day. And then you kind of come back in and you're jumping in, you're totally making should we say, a big difference in the fact that, he wasn't there for the last 7 weeks. So he's coming back and he's telling us this, he's doing that, he's telling me this and that. And you are like almost like a guest. It's probably the best way to kind of describe it, especially the first week or so you come back. I noticed straight away, like kids have changed. Kids change a lot quicker than adults do. So, someone's doing something different now, or someone's got someone on somewhere else. And
I think that dynamic can be really difficult as well, because you're coming home, you need a break. Your wife needs a break. Everybody needs a break. And then there's the whole who's been working harder thing. And it's so difficult. And I think it's totally a thing. And it's not really spoken about a whole lot, I don't think, but I'm pretty sure it's a fairly universal experience. And Joe, this will make you laugh, I think. Years and years ago, I met an astronaut. This doesn't surprise you, right? Of course, yeah. So I used to hang out with astronauts quite a lot. Yeah, I should do. I used to hang out with astronauts quite a lot. So a previous company that I worked for 5 years, Apollo, one of the lovely initiatives that they ran was sponsoring during Science Week in Aberdeen. They were one of the sponsors for NASA's astronauts and engineers coming to Aberdeen to speak to young people and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool initiative. So each time they come over, I had the fun thing where I'd get to hang out with astronauts and go for the odd dinner with them and be part of the events and so on. And one night when I was out to dinner with this astronaut and his wife, we were chatting away, and I was kind of like, God, what was it like when you came back from, your mission? You'd been gone for weeks and so on and so forth. And he was saying how his last day in space, I always remember the conversation really well with Bob Sankar, he was called. His last day in space, there was bad weather at the Cape, called the Cape Canaveral, the Cape. I thought this was really fun.
Yeah.
A bad weather at the Cape. So they had to orbit for another 24 hours. And he said he sat and he looked out the window, and just the thing that struck him was he was one of the few people who would ever live that could see what he was seeing, to sit and look at planet Earth. And stayed up all night and all day just looking and just wishing that his wife and kids could be with him to share the moment. And there's no way that was ever going to be possible. So he's incredibly grateful and privileged, but sad that he couldn't share it with the people he loved. And he eventually got back down to earth safely. And I said to his wife, God, what was it like getting him back? And she said, well, yeah, I had some kids to raise. I was kind of like, are you done being an astronaut now? Can you get home and, change some nappies and sort of step up a bit? Everybody else was saying, oh my gosh, he's a hero. He's been to space and he's come back. And she was like, could kind of back me up a bit more. That would be really great. So it was very funny. And it was kind of that, when you're the North Sea Tiger who's come back, you've done another hitch. And you've powered the lives of all of these people, and you're knackered, and then you get home and they're like, you've been on holiday, what are you on about? So
yeah the real work starts when you get home.
Exactly. Tricky. So I guess it's kind of giving everybody a bit of slack, isn't it, and respecting the fact that we're
understanding one another a bit more as well. But it's
easier said than done.
Yeah, that's the other thing of it. Like, and I guess it's probably it's a strange one, because I've come across quite a lot of oilmen, should we say, not quite so many renewable people in renewables, but quite a lot of them are divorced. Like, quite a large amount of them are divorced, have had 2 wives, and there must be a stat, I don't know what it is, but there must be some amount of divorces in the industry.
Absolutely. And this, again, is linked to the mental health thing, right? So Our offshore personnel, there are different risk factors, there are different risk profiles that you can look at for all sorts of socioeconomic things related to the offshore way of working. And it's not just offshore, lots of sectors and industries, whether it's the armed forces, whether it's aviation, whether it's construction. There are certain sectors and industries where large groups of people live in a way or work in a way that's not entirely conventional. And with that, A, it attracts a certain type of person, and B, that way of working can either perpetuate certain things, it can have really great outcomes in terms of morale, team working, high performing teams, all of these great things, but there can be downsides to it as well. And I think, as you say, it can be really hard on relationships. And again, all of this is inextricably linked to mental health.
Yeah. Do you think companies are doing enough for it?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So some are and some aren't. It's the usual story,
Right.
isn't it? But what's really exciting is the initiative that I'm leading at the moment with a focus on providing better mental health support for offshore personnel in the North Sea. Whilst it was driven from a place of decommissioning, initially, it's kind of broadened out a little bit from that. And the kind of hope through that is to get better support for more people, a universal type of support. Because at the moment, some companies are doing amazing things to support their people. Other companies are doing some things that are trying their best. But additionally, there's some organizations that have a way to go with getting up to speed on what really good support for offshore workers can look like. And another thing that I've discovered in my travels is that people who work offshore, providing a helpline is not enough. And emailing a few slides to have a look at or doing an e-learning course is not enough. Our offshore personnel respond much better to in-person support. Our offshore personnel trust better when programs of support are rolled out in person. So I've looked at the uptake of employee assistance programs, which generally are about 10%. So about 90% of the provision that exists, people aren't tapping into. And when you look into that in more detail, where people are offered support on a face-to-face, on-site basis with people coming to a platform or an asset, sitting one-to-one with somebody, having a chat with them about their mental health, explaining what support's available and why they should feel safe to access that support, the uptake goes through the roof. So the other assets and platforms that aren't receiving that yet, these are the same type of demographic, discipline, everything else. So they should have the same kind of uptake, but that personal rollout piece is really important. So this initiative that I'm running at the moment, Scottish Action for Mental Health are involved, who are a very important national mental health charity. And I can't say too much at the moment, but we're making significant progress at developing a program through Scottish Action for Mental Health that my hope and dream is will be rolled out sooner rather than later, offshore, with specifically trained mental health support workers who will travel offshore to offer more support to more people in a universal fashion, regardless of who they work for.
But one of the things that comes to mind actually when you're speaking about it, do you not think quite a large part of helping someone offshore and that is developing a culture offshore that helps them when they're out there? Do you know? So say if you go to a platform and the welfare's horrendous, the food's not brilliant, the Wi-Fi's crap. Do you not think they contribute in some way to the issues that will be lingering behind them? Because say you come off shift, the first thing you want to do is you want to go call your missus. Oh, I can't call my missus because the Wi-Fi's crap. Or most important thing is during the days is, well, maybe it's just me, but I know there's a few others, is food. Food's a huge part of getting through your day. Absolutely. But if you're going in at lunchtime and the food's crap, then that's going to continuously, you're not going to get your dopamine hit or whatever hits you need off food that help kind of boost you up. And then if there's a culture, if the welfare is pretty poor, if everyone, if people are fighting to get into rec rooms, for example, do you not think things like that though also need to be taken into consideration to try and benefit and try and help, which also, immediately uplifts boys that are offshore. I'm going offshore for however long, but it's all right. I've got, great Wi-Fi, great food. I can call my missus whenever I want, without FaceTime the kids, all that kind of stuff, or partner, whatever it be. That's that's also something I think that would change a lot of people's mindsets when they're out there, knowing that they're going to almost not a home from home, but something that, you've got very similar benefits to it.
Absolutely. And when it comes to boys and girls working offshore, it's
Yeah, I know that was a bit sexist. Apologies.
well, don't worry, we all do these things. No, it's really important. And I recently, as part of this initiative that we've just been speaking about, I ran a survey. I think we spoke about it before, of offshore personnel, and a couple of the questions I added were about welfare, because it really matters to people. Of course, it does. And food quality is a biggie. Access to facilities where you're not having to share every part of your facilities is really important. And generally how the assets looked after, and again, back to decom, particularly on the glide path to decom. So some operators have really taken a huge amount of pride in how they maintain the asset during decommissioning for specifically this reason. And Shell UK have been real trailblazers in this, particularly on the Brents, and I've had some really interesting chats with them about how they maintained the pleasantness of the working environment through decom on the Brents, and it's a really great story that deserves to be heard by all operators, and the importance of continuing to maintain the asset, to update things that need updated, to make sure facilities are good, to repaint things that need repainted, to keep the quality of food good. It is so important, and particularly when you're working in a hostile environment away from home, working long shifts. The pleasures are not in abundance, let's be honest, but having a good laugh with your colleagues, having access to really decent marabou chocolate, having good meals, particularly on night shift. My gosh, midnight meal, what are they going to drag out, And getting that bit right really matters to people on such a fundamental level.
How important is the senior roles though in that regard?
How do you mean?
Well, how important is it that they keep that kind of morale up? They're leading by example.
Oh, from a
And
leadership
obviously keeping
perspective.
in mind, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's, setting the tone in any leadership capacity on or offshore is such a responsibility. Humans, whilst we're very amazing creatures, we're also really simple creatures in a lot of ways. And you can get a bit carried away with our modern, amazing way of life, and you can forget about some serious basic fundamentals that will never go away as long as the human condition is the human condition. People like to be led. People like to feel a sense of somebody's sort of running the show, somebody's setting the tone, and how that translates and permeates through the team, particularly in an environment like the offshore environment, is absolutely key. You know yourself, Joe, crew change, sometimes the whole feeling of the place can go one way or the other, depending on who comes off the chopper. And that is a fact. We all know it, and it's a wonderful responsibility and privilege to any leader on or offshore to have a think about the shadow they cast, if you like, and how that affects other people. And often when you have a bigger shadow, i.e. if you're a big presence or a big character, you've also got a real responsibility, because depending on how you're feeling, it's going to have a real impact on others.
What advice would you say to someone who's struggling but doesn't want to speak out?
I think that's a really, really great question. I hope people can, through the provision of better mental health support, through the continued work to remove stigma around mental health, there's still among some people a fear of speaking out in case it counts against them somehow. The psychological safety is so important for people to be able to be honest about how they're feeling and access support that they need. I think anybody who feels able to check in with colleagues, to notice that a colleague maybe isn't okay, have an awkward conversation. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody that you think is struggling. And equally, if you're struggling, I think truly believing that everybody struggles at some point and it's not your fault. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's a very strange thing that physical health is viewed so differently to mental health. You would never cut your finger offshore and feel really scared about telling the medic you need a plaster. You know, you just think, oh, what's this going to mean about me? And it's a given. Of course, you have to report that you cut your finger, and then we'll talk about how we don't do it again, and we'll learn lessons from it. You'll get your plaster and you'll get on with your day. It's not even a thing. And you've got your PPE. You'll use your PPE. Everything's fine. But when it comes to mental health, not just offshore, but everywhere societally, there are still some pockets of stigma that we have got to get after, because mental health, just like physical health, it's a journey. Sometimes it's better than others. Sometimes you get a cold. Sometimes you don't feel well for a length of time. Same with your mental health. Might not be great sometimes, but it doesn't mean it's your fault. It doesn't mean you shouldn't feel psychologically safe. And you deserve to feel better.
So I'm not as sexist as I made out earlier. Women in the industry. How much of a change has there been since you started?
So that's a good question. So I think there has been some real positive change. Not enough. There has been positive change. There's still a real lack of diversity in our sector, and offshore that's even more so. It's better than it was, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. I sometimes feel like it's exponentially better, but I'm often reminded that might just be my own experience. That might just be the fact that I kind of have been quite successful in my career and I've got to a certain level. Maybe that I'm having a better experience. It doesn't mean that all women are having a better experience. I'm very proud of the company that I work for. Here at PDI, we're unusual for an engineering company in the energy sector, that our leadership team is actually majority female. And we have the very best people for every job in this organization. Gender is, of course, never a factor when we're hiring. But we have an amazing leadership team, and that happens to be majority female. So that's a really positive sign and quite unusual. But there's still a lot that needs to be done. We need to get more great women into the energy sector. We need to get more girls and young people coming into the energy sector in general. Programs, again, I mentioned Shell earlier, but Shell's Girls in Energy program, absolutely fantastic. Sees hundreds of girls from Aberdeenshire put through an engineering course as part of their secondary education. Absolutely brilliant. So love all these initiatives. Want to see more women in energy. It is getting better. It's still got a long way to go. When I was offshore, it was very, very different scene. I worked generally on vessels with 140 PRB, and generally it was 139 men and me. And the only time I saw that change significantly was when we would sail into Norway, and that was.
I was literally just the way to say, do you not think it's better following the Norway model? Norway, in my opinion, I've worked there a few times, and I don't think there's any. I think they look at a person as a person. That's one thing I will say. Like if you're physically able, like whether you're a man or woman, they've got quite a broad range of people working in all over the place, from the bottom of the chain right up to the top. They're a really good example of it, to be fair.
They are, from a D&I perspective, not just gender as well. So Norwegian companies, it's really interesting sometimes looking at some of the demographics for major Norwegian employers, even from a nationality point of view. really interesting. But for me, yeah, purely from a gender point of view, it was very inspiring for me when I first started sailing in and out of Norway. And at the time it was Statoil, pre-Equinor. And to sail into these Norwegian ports, and we'd do a crew change. And for the first time, I saw female project managers, I saw female project engineers, female crane operators. And that was hugely inspiring for me. And I've never forgotten it. And I always think when I'm traveling to Norway on business, I always feel grateful flying into Norway and thinking, I remember how this country made me feel as a young woman working offshore, looking for role models, because it's a bit of a cliche, but it's true about needing to see it to be it. And young women in our sector need to see women at senior level, women in traditionally male roles, doing a fantastic job alongside their male colleagues.
Back to the UK. Do you think there are barriers still in place for women?
That's a challenging question. Yes, I would. I would say that hygiene factors are good, right? In terms of nobody's stopping women choosing engineering degrees. Clearly, women are allowed to work in every company. Great news. I think most of the barriers are much more subtle than that. Unconscious bias continues to be a massive problem, and just about every woman that you speak to will tell you that. And that's not an energy sector problem, particularly. We see it more because of the lack of diversity. It's a societal challenge, and you can start digging into research that explains it and sometimes can help you make sense of it a bit more. But there's a lot of evidence to support a theory that, generally speaking, women are assumed incompetent until they prove themselves competent, whereas men are often assumed competent until they prove themselves incompetent. So there's this authority gap. There's actually a really interesting book called The Authority Gap, where it looks into that research in more detail to say, why is it that there's an assumption from the outset that men are going to be more competent than women? And it turns out this happens really early on. So this is going to take generations to sort this out, but we've got to recognize it in ourselves. And this isn't just men. This is not men. This is everybody. Women are at it as well with unconscious bias all the time. And myself, you not think that if I hear someone's a pilot, I ask what his name is. Oh, his name's Sheila. Oh my God, why did I assume that pilot was male? We're all at it. But the first step is recognizing we're at it, challenging our own behavior, calling ourselves out and doing better, and that, I think, if we can all commit to that, we've got to start removing some of these barriers.
One thing I will say from my previous 2 years in renewables, I have noticed there's a lot more women in it, and in senior positions as well. I will say that. Obviously, oil and gas, I think I only went on one platform where there was an OEM. There was a woman, I think. Yeah, probably. But I have seen there's a lot more women in renewables offshore. That's just from my experience. It might be totally different elsewhere, but business development and leadership. What's it like going into a boardroom nowadays?
It's my favorite place to be. I mean,
is it heck?
It is, but it's my job. I love it. I love negotiating. I love, navigating challenges and negotiating ways to make things better. And that is my line of work, thinking about how we provide the services we provide and how do we do it better? How do we understand our clients' needs better? And then how do we tailor the service that we're offering to really speak to the needs of our customers? But what are they doing next year? What are they doing in 10 years? How do we set ourselves up now to support these customers correctly? Which customers align best with us culturally and in terms of our values and everything else? So this stuff I love. In terms of how is life in the boardroom in our sector right now, it's a difficult time in our sector. There's no two ways about it. So whilst in my line of work, I absolutely love my job, love what we do, believe in our sector. Absolutely. We are facing a very tough old time, and we have been for quite some time now, and it's hard. But what I will say is that as a sector, it's brought us closer together, and there have been some benefits in terms of how we work, how we communicate, how we collaborate, that word again. But the alliancing that we're doing, particularly within the supply chain, but also how we set up ways of working with our clients that are innovative and challenging and positively disruptive. So there's always positives, Joe, and there's plenty of positives just now, but it's not an easy market right now in the UK.
100% agree. Your offshore time, did any of your experience offshore help you in there, in the boardroom nowadays?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So experiences I had offshore, obviously technically are useful, because challenges I faced during my offshore years taught me things that are useful on a technical level constantly. But more than that, understanding the working environment, understanding the challenges that our offshore crews face, and understanding what makes life easier or harder for the execution phase of a job is very useful. So I always think that understanding the experience of all of your colleagues, your friends, whoever it is, understanding the world that they live in better is always a good thing.
Where's the opportunities in the energy industry right now?
In terms of the UK or globally?
Either or.
So, as you very well know, domestic production of hydrocarbons isn't really at an all-time high in the UK at the moment. We're importing way too much gas, and we should be producing more. There's no two ways about that. So I am very hopeful, though. We've got some glimmers of hope at the moment in terms of policy, and that should lead to some enhanced opportunities in the UK for sure. So we do have some really hopeful opportunities and some recent developments from a licensing perspective in the last week or so that will drive opportunities for the local supply chain and for our operators. So very exciting on that. Decommissioning, of course, massive opportunity for our supply chain and for our workforce. Brilliant. And then as we're looking to add energy, we spoke about it earlier, energy addition, as opposed to energy transition. I'm not ready to transition yet. But as we look at new energies, huge opportunities. Our people in the traditional part, if you like, of the energy sector, the oil and gas industry, are some of the most smart, innovative engineers, technologists, analysts, project managers you will find anywhere. And these are the same people that are driving the future of the renewable energy side of life as well. So there are lots of great opportunities, Joe. And as a people and as a planet Earth, energy is central to everything. So
Oh yeah. 100%. I think a lot of people forget that as well, though. Unfortunately, I don't think people realize and this part of the reason why I started our podcast is from the second you put your kettle on in the morning to the second you switch your lights off at night, every single aspect and part of your day's got energy behind it. Absolutely. Whether it's from oil, whether it's from renewables or whatnot.
And in our comfortable lives, and our very comfortable Western lives, you can quickly forget what energy poverty means for a lot of the world. And people who are unable to access predictable, safe energy, it's central to having a healthy and happy human experience. So we should feel proud of the sector that we work in. I'm hugely proud of being part of the energy sector. We all should be, and it's good to be proud of what we do.
At the moment, from my experience and speaking to contractors and stuff, work seems to be difficult in the UK especially. But what would you say to people that potentially, thinking, right, I want to try and go down the decom route, there's probably going to be years worth of work there, which obviously there is because there's plenty of platforms and whatnot to decom. What kind of advice would you give them to try and get into it? How do they go about finding their way into it?
So I think there's no kind of particular recipe for success in terms of securing specific decom work. I mean, I would say that with any type of job hunting, I think I'm a huge fan of networking, which might surprise you. I'm a huge fan as well for everybody in every stage of their careers, even pre-career, students, children, whoever you are. Remember, there's always somebody watching. Remember that you never know where your next break connection is going to be, and who your next employer is going to be. So whatever you're doing, even if you're not exactly where you want to be, do a good job and apply yourself. Do the best that you can and present yourself well. Act with integrity and kindness, communicate well, and give a good account of yourself, because you have no idea where it's going to lead to next. You know, I could have really had a rubbish time doing the dishes on the USV Gorm, but I'm really glad I applied myself, because I've got a much better appreciation for what catering crew do offshore. I've got a much better appreciation of what it feels like when you're on your feet for 14 hours a day. I'm really glad I did that. And I met people in that role that I still know now, who have been really helpful to me along the way. So you never know. You never know who's there. So do the best you can. Apply yourself always. Network. Put yourself out there. Ask. I did a little video a while ago talking about this. I was given some great advice many moons ago by a guy I worked with, Alan Cairns, when I first started at Apollo many years ago. And I said to him, Alan, what advice would you give me? I've just joined this company. He said, just ask. I said, just ask. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And he said, if you're interested in something, ask about it. If you want an opportunity, ask. Just ask.
Yep.
I thought, God, that's really good. It's really simple, but it's really good. But the amount of us that don't, we sit there thinking,
Oh, 100%.
God, that looks interesting. I'd be dead good at that. What I'll do is I'll just sit here and not say
watch
anything.
it.
Yeah, and watch it go past me. That's great. Oh.
I hope someone comes and asks me, what do you want to find out about this?
Yeah. So if you're there and there's something interesting, or you want to learn, or you like something, getting into that kind of just ask way of life, I think is really good. And for anybody who's looking for a role, wants a role change, or wants to move into a different space, getting into the habit of just asking somebody, I'd really like to pick your brains. I'd really like to know more about what you do. So any chance you might have a coffee with me? It's amazing how many people will say, of course I will.
Yeah.
I don't feel as knowledgeable as I should about offshore wind. A wee while ago, I reached out to the chairman of one of the major offshore wind developers. I said, hi, you don't know me. I'm very much biased towards oil and gas in terms of my technical experience. I'd love to know more about what you do. Is there any chance you could find me an hour? And he's, of course. He came into my office the next week and we had a really good discussion. People tend to like to help. You get some people that don't. Most humans kind of like doing a good job, being nice, getting to share their wisdom and help. So just ask.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I think a bit of it's an ego thing. People are too shy to look like they're asking for something or looking stupid or something like that. And
100%. And
100%.
100%. Like, and you know, when you're younger as well, it's like I spent decades thinking about everything that I wasn't, all the things that I wasn't good at, you know, focused on my shortcomings and just giving myself a really hard time with all my self-limiting beliefs, and thinking about, you know, am I attractive enough? Am I thin enough? Am I clever enough? Am I smart enough? Whatever it might be. Just all the things that I felt that I wasn't quite enough with. And then when I did my leadership studies at Cranfield University, which was one of the most wonderful experiences I've had, certainly educationally, the most important experience I've had. And I was very fortunate that PDI supported me to go to Cranfield and study there, which was a massive dream of mine. So I completed the high performance leadership program there. And a huge focus of that program is identifying and challenging your own self-limiting beliefs, and also figuring out you'll only be really good at a couple of things.
Yeah.
And that's great. Good for you.
Yeah.
You'll be good at a couple of things and you'll be really good at it. So that program assumes if you're successful in gaining a place on that program, the assumption is you're really, really good at a couple of things. Let's focus on that. There'll be other people that are great at the other stuff. So how do you find those people, work with them, alliance, collaborate, empower your colleagues, empower your team, and you stick to your knitting of what you're really good at? Because also, we're always so busy trying to develop the stuff we're not good at. Now, that is important to a point. My admin skills are not great, and I continually need to work on that because it's annoying for other people when my admin lets everybody down, right? So I do need to do some more work on that. But I don't need to try and do everybody else's jobs for them. That's not a good use of my time. I don't need to focus all my efforts on the things that don't come naturally to me. She says, even though she plays golf all the time and is a terrible golfer. But you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
It's important, I think, to really get out of that I'm scared of feeling silly thing, because man, is it empowering when you can. I was in a meeting recently and this acronym kept getting used, and I'm pretty good with my acronyms. I said, I was really sorry, guys. Sorry. Can we just stop for a second? There's 20 people there. I said, what is that acronym you keep using? And I got an explanation. I said, why have I never heard that before? And the person said, oh, it's actually company and department specific. So we only use it in this department. Of course I wouldn't have known them. And everybody else on the call said, I was wondering the same. We were all wondering, right?
Yeah.
So if you can just get into the zone of, if you don't know stuff, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't reflect on you in any way. And having the confidence to say, hey, excuse me, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm really, I kind of know my stuff, but I don't know what you're talking about. Could you explain that to me? And it's a habit. And it's a muscle that you need to build to be able to not have that sick feeling in your pit of your stomach when you go, I'm just going to out myself as an idiot and everybody's going to be looking at me. They're actually not. People have other things to be going on with, and people aren't not actually as judgmental as you might imagine.
I like to think of it as I've got 4 kids, two younger boys. They ask about 1,000 questions a day. I don't think I've ever once thought of them as stupid. So I like to think about the kind of same along the same lines, even though some of the questions are the same over and over again. But I think it's very much a state. It's very much an ego thing where people are too worried to ask about something, and you often find if you ask early on, the rest of the conversation you're well on board with anyway, because you know exactly what you're probably thinking about the whole time through it is what is that.
Honestly, and you're so right. And that's a great example with your kids. And I love that, because there's something I often think about when I'm giving myself a hard time, which I try and do less of these days because it's such a waste of time. But, if I'm giving it kind of, oh gosh, you look awful today, or what you doing, or what did you say that for? Why did you swear? Why did you swear, Kirstie, all those times? Everybody's going to be sitting thinking about the fact that you swore. Why did you have to swear? And all this stuff. So I think to myself, if I'm giving myself a really hard time or judging myself, would I do that to the kids? Would I sit there and say, God almighty, that was a really silly thing you said. I bet everyone's going to be thinking about that all day. Would I say that to kids? Of course I wouldn't. What I would say to them is, hey, dust yourself off. We all say silly things. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, go again.
Yeah, come on, let's get on with the day. So how do you treat yourself with the same respect and kindness that you treat people that you really, really love and care about? And something you said as well about that whole, you wouldn't assume your kids were stupid for asking a question. I often say this to my teams as well, and I've always tried to get this across to people that I'm responsible for managing. I've always said to people, if I hire you, it's because you're really good, right? So I have hired you because you're smart and capable, interesting and talented. If you don't understand something, it's highly unlikely that all of that good stuff's gone somewhere. It's going to be one or two things. I haven't explained it at all, or I haven't explained it well. Either of those things we can address. So if you say to me, oh, Kirstie, you haven't explained X, Y, and Z to me. Could you explain it to me or somebody else? Sure. Also, Kirstie, you explained this before. I haven't got a clue what you're on about. That's on me to say I haven't communicated that well at all, because it's not that somebody wonderful that I've hired has suddenly become incompetent. So I think getting into that mindset as well to make sure that your teams feel psychologically safe and empowered to challenge you and say, listen, I don't understand this. I need help, or you explained this to me and I didn't grasp it. So back to you. And I think it's really good to get into that cycle.
What's the proudest moment of your career?
Oh, That's a wonderful question. And I have to think carefully about how I answer that because there's something going on at the moment that I can't fully tell you about today. But I think if you
By the time this is released, it'll probably already have happened, so everyone will know anyway.
I know.
But don't go into
So-
your personal career then prior to the thing that you want to talk about.
Well, this is a biggie for my personal career. And
Oh God. Second biggest then.
well, hang on. If this isn't going to be aired straight away, and you and I, we're in a circle of trust, right?
Oh yeah.
So there will be some news, which I do hope that you're going to read about very soon, which is a hugely, hugely proud moment in my career, but much more than that for our company. So we spoke earlier a couple of times about positive disruption, about alliancing, and the best and most wonderful part of my job is creating jobs for other people. And at the moment, this is all very cryptic, I know. At the moment, I'm right in the thick today and this week of finalising something that's going to be really important for job creation in Aberdeen. So that's very, very proud for me. In terms of something I can speak more openly about today, I was very proud. It was about a year and a half ago or so. When we were in the thick of the kind of energy sector political crisis, if you like, I invited Scottish Labour to come to Aberdeen for a day with me. And again, it's kind of a just ask situation. So I was at a round table and there was a senior member of the Scottish Labour Party there. And I dropped him a note after the round table and said, I enjoyed spending time with you, but what I would like you to do is come back to Aberdeen for a day just with me. A lot of the time that you come to Aberdeen, you spend time, these politicians, with a lot of operators. I don't think you spend as much time with supply chain, really getting to know the people that power this place. And I'd love it if you came to Aberdeen, spent some time with me. I initially asked for an hour. That was it. I said, can you come to Aberdeen for an hour? And we'll have a meeting and I'll introduce you to some supply chain people. Well, they never replied. So I thought,
That's good to them.
Typical politicians, I thought, unbelievable. I thought this guy was great. I had a really good vibe with him and they didn't even reply. And then a few weeks later, I got this very apologetic email saying, I'm terribly sorry it's taken so long to get back to you. The election has been very distracting, obviously. But it was from Daniel Johnson, as the politician we're talking about. It was from Daniel Johnson's assistant, who said, Daniel would love to take you up on your offer and he'd love to come to Aberdeen and spend some time with you. So we eked out the itinerary, and long story short, it ended up being a whole day. So I had a whole day with Daniel. I took him to meet my team, my colleagues here at PDI. I took him to the National Decommissioning Centre. And then I hosted a private lunch with 22 senior leaders from the energy sector. We also had the IADC there to represent the drilling community, a number of chief execs of operators, as well as I said before, senior leaders from supply chain companies. And I was very proud to do my part that day in terms of the political process and spend a whole day shining a light on the people, the stories, the technology, the small companies, the relationship these companies have with exploration and production companies. And I felt really proud that I had done that and brought that together. So that was a very proud moment for me.
Second proudest, obviously, after the first proudest moment, is going to be released later on in a wee while, but it would be out by then anyway.
And I was going to talk about the mental health stuff, but we've spoken a lot about that, and I hope that once I'm able to confirm what I sincerely hope is the outcome of that, that will trump everything. If part of my legacy on planet Earth can be ensuring that some great people who power our energy sector get better help when they need it, that would be, job done for me.
Well, fingers crossed for you. And thank you so much for coming on as well.
Oh, it's been lovely chatting to you, Joe. And thank you so much for including me in the podcast. I love following it. So thank you.
No, thank you.